Hi everyone, I'm Shyam. In this video, we are going to discuss a very important topic in polity. Generally, polity is a very important paper for the exams like groups and civil services. Of course, in the exams like police, staff selection commission and other exams, polity is also important. However, the weightage is comparatively lesser in other exams compared with exams like UPSC and groups. In our school days, polity was actually called civics. However, polity has a speciality. We can call polity a multifaceted subject because polity is a kind of link among all the general studies subjects. That is why polity is always given the highest importance and highest prominence in competitive exams. However, in this video, I'll be talking in both the languages, English and Telugu, and in polity, I'm going to discuss a very small but very important topic called fundamental duties. పాలిటీకి సంబంధించి అసలు సిలబస్ ఏంటి, పాలిటీ నుంచి ఎన్ని క్వశ్చన్స్ ఏ ఎగ్జామ్స్లో ఎక్స్పెక్ట్ చేయొచ్చు, పాలిటీకి సంబంధించి ఏ టాపిక్స్ మనం బాగా చదవాలి, అసలు పాలిటీ ఎలా ప్రిపేర్ అవ్వాలి, పాలిటీకి సంబంధించిన ఇంపార్టెంట్ రిఫరెన్స్ బుక్స్ ఏమున్నాయి, ఇటువంటివన్నీ నేను మీకు సపరేట్ వీడియోలో డిస్కస్ చేస్తాను. ఈ వీడియోలో ఫండమెంటల్ డ్యూటీస్ అని చాలా చిన్న బట్ వెరీ ఇంపార్టెంట్ టాపిక్ని మనం డిస్కస్ చేద్దాం. హవెవర్, ఫండమెంటల్ డ్యూటీస్ అనే ఈ టాపిక్కి సంబంధించి నేను ఒక బేసిక్ ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ ఈ వీడియోలో ఇవ్వడానికి ట్రై చేస్తాను. ఈ ఫండమెంటల్ డ్యూటీస్కి సంబంధించి ఐఎమ్ గోయింగ్ టు మేక్ 2 videos, 2 parts. This video is the part 1 of fundamental duties, where I'll be giving you the basic information about fundamental duties, followed by the part 2 where we will go a slight deeper. పార్ట్ 2లో కొంత డెప్త్కి మనం ఫండమెంటల్ డ్యూటీస్లోకి వెళ్దాం. అదే వీడియోలో మనం ఫండమెంటల్ డ్యూటీస్ అనే టాపిక్ నుంచి క్వశ్చన్స్ ఎలా వస్తాయో కూడా మనం క్లియర్గా ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేద్దాం. సో ఫండమెంటల్ డ్యూటీస్కి సంబంధించి మనం వీడియో స్టార్ట్ చేద్దాం. నెంబర్ 1, అసలు మన కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్కి సంబంధించి ఎన్ని ఫండమెంటల్ డ్యూటీస్ ఉన్నాయి? హౌ మెనీ ఫండమెంటల్ డ్యూటీస్ వీ హ్యావ్ ఇన్ ద కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్? దెర్ ఆర్ 2 types ఆఫ్ క్వశ్చన్స్. ఇప్పుడు ఎన్ని ఉన్నాయి, కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ ఫ్రేమ్ చేసేటప్పటికి ఎన్ని ఫండమెంటల్ డ్యూటీస్ ఉన్నాయి? ఇది చాలా కేర్ఫుల్గా అర్థం చేసుకోవాల్సిన ఒక క్వశ్చన్. వెరీ ఇంపార్టెంట్ థింగ్ టు అండర్స్టాండ్ ఈస్, we all know the basic information that we really had a lot of struggle by the British. We were under the rule of the British for many decades, and after a long struggle, after a very long freedom struggle, at last we got the freedom in the year 1947. And from that year we started, all the experts got together, they start framing the Indian constitution. They have done a massive research. They have really studied the constitutions of all the countries, many countries all over the world, and they have taken some references from some constitutions of different countries, and finally in the year 1950 they are ready with the constitution, right? We all know this. There is a separate topic called making of constitution, in which we will discuss in detail how the constitution was framed and all that, who were the people involved in that, whatever. But at last the constitution is ready. Now what I am asking you is, by the time when the constitution was ready, how many fundamental duties we had? Please understand, when the constitution was framed, we had no fundamental duties. We only had fundamental rights. So the framers of the constitution, what they thought was, Indians had a struggle for many centuries together, and at last we got the freedom, and why should they have some duties? Let them have only fundamental rights. That is why when the constitution of India was framed, when it was ready by Jan 26, 1950, what we have to understand is, we had only fundamental rights. We didn't have fundamental duties. But in the year 1976, for the first time, fundamental duties were introduced in the Indian Constitution. In the year 1976, fundamental duties were introduced in the Indian Constitution. And the basic idea of fundamental duties was inspired from which country? The basic idea of fundamental duties was inspired from Russia. So we have taken the idea of fundamental duties from Russia. In the year what? 1976. If you remember, 1976 is like from 1975 to 1977, we all know emergency. During the time of Indira Gandhi, we had emergency, and in that time, fundamental duties were introduced in Indian Constitution. 1976లో మనకి ఫండమెంటల్ డ్యూటీస్ ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేశారు. అంటే ఒరిజినల్ కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్లో లేని దాన్ని కొత్తగా పెట్టాలంటే కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ ఏం చేయాలి? అమెండ్ చేయాలి. సో ఇన్ ద ఇయర్ 1976, Constitution was amended to introduce fundamental duties. Which amendment was required? Which amendment? How many amendment was done? It was 42nd amendment. Very, very, very important bit. Very important bit for all exams. In the year 1976, 42nd amendment, fundamental duties were introduced in the Indian Constitution. How many fundamental duties were introduced? 10 fundamental duties were introduced in the Indian Constitution. Now I am asking you another question. How many fundamental duties are there right now? 10? No. Right now we have 11 fundamental duties. So the point here to remember is, in the year 1976, 42nd amendment was done, by which 10 fundamental duties were put in the Constitution. But in the year 2002, again another amendment was made, that was 86th amendment. In the 86th amendment, year 2002, another one more fundamental duty was introduced. That is how altogether right now we have 11 fundamental duties. So far whatever I have discussed, there are bits to be noted. So whenever you come across my video where I will be talking about general studies or current affairs, immediately make sure you have running notes, because general studies part is very easy if you have a wonderful habit of notes making. Many people, what they do is, they listen to the classes or they read the books, but they don't make enough notes. So that what happens? A day before the exam or a month before the exam, they don't know what to prepare. Correct? So whenever you watch my video of general studies part, or even English also, English grammar also, make a habit of running notes. I'll quickly recap and ask you some very simple questions. How many fundamental duties we had in the beginning? 0. How many fundamental duties were introduced in the year 1976? 10. Which amendment in 1976? 42nd amendment. And 11th fundamental duty was introduced in the year 2002. Under which amendment? 86th amendment. Now I'll go back to the year 1976. In the 1976, for the first time, fundamental duties were introduced. How many? 10. By the recommendation of which committee? Sardar Swaran Singh committee. At that time, the government of India, the Congress government, which was the ruling party then, appointed a committee called Swaran Singh committee to study and advise the government of India to recommend some fundamental duties. And Swaran Singh committee worked very hard, gave a big report to the government of India advising so and so and many fundamental duties. And government of India accepted most of the ideas given by the Swaran Singh committee, but rejected 3 ideas. Rejected how many ideas? Rejected 3 suggestions given by the Swaran Singh committee. What are those 3 ideas? Number 1, Swaran Singh committee said, if somebody doesn't follow the fundamental duty, they should be penalized. Swaran Singh committee said, if somebody doesn't follow the fundamental duty, they should be penalized. They should have penalty. But the government said, no, this idea is something that we cannot accept. And second advice the Swaran Singh committee gave was, paying taxes is also fundamental duty. Paying taxes is also fundamental duty. But government did not agree to this point. And third advice given by the Swaran Singh committee was, no law in this regard can be questioned. Means nobody can question this particular law regarding fundamental duties. But government said, no, this is entirely a kind of monarchy kind of idea. We can't accept this idea. And that is how these 3 suggestions given by the Sardar Swaran Singh committee were not accepted by the government of India. And why did I say this again and again? Because a very important question can come in the exam tomorrow. Which of the following suggestions given by Swaran Singh committee was not agreed, was not taken by the Government of India. And to answer such questions, we have to really understand the suggestions which were given by this forensic committee but not accepted by the Government of India. So, this is what about fundamental duties, when they were introduced and how they were introduced and how amendments were made, under which committee. But a simple question I'll ask you, why should we have fundamental duties? In the beginning, the framers of the constitution thought, let us not have fundamental duties, right? But why did they decide to have fundamental duties? Because of many reasons, the fundamental rights given to the people might have been misused. So there should be some duty to the citizens of India by which the citizens of India must abide by those duties. The citizens of India must abide by those rules and regulations. That is why fundamental duties were introduced. Now one question I'll ask you and I'll end this part 1 video. Are the fundamental rights applicable to foreigners who are in India? The answer is no. Very important. Fundamental duties are applicable only to Indians. Fundamental duties are not applicable to the foreigners who are residing in India for a temporary basis. But in the case of fundamental rights, both the foreigners as well as Indians can avail of the fundamental rights. But in the case of fundamental duties, only Indians have the fundamental duties to be followed, whereas foreigners, it is not the same case with the foreigners. So these are some basic details to remember to remember about fundamental duties. But in this video, I'll end this video only by sharing with you these small details, and in the part 2 of the fundamental duties, I'll add very important points about fundamental duties, like what are those fundamental duties, because many times a question comes in the exam, which of the following is not a fundamental duty? And to answer such questions, we definitely have to understand what are those fundamental duties. And another question can come, are the fundamental duties justiciable? No, fundamental duties are not justiciable. Why they are not justiciable? And that is why we got Verma committee in there 1999. What is this Verma committee? All that wonderful subject we will talk in the part 2 of the fundamental right. So part 1 fundamental rights is a basic video which we have to understand the basic information such as which year the fundamental duties were introduced and which amendment under which